Welcome to the final webinar in our spring series, Tree Planting 101. My name is Elise Shadler and I work for the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, a partnership between UVM Extension and the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. I will be moderating this webinar this afternoon. Our presenter today is Brian Sullivan. Brian is an arborist technician with the City of Burlington's Department of Parks and Recreation and has 23 years of experience in forestry and arboriculture. He is an ISA certified arborist and municipal specialist, and he currently acts as the vice president of the New England chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. He began his career with the USDA Forest Service working on reforestation and timber stand improvement in Montana, and he estimates that he has planted about 45,000 trees in his lifetime. So he's the perfect man to present on this topic. With that, I'm going to hand it on over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Elise. And I'd like to get started by thanking Elise Shadler from the Vermont Urban Community Forestry Program and Danielle Fitzko as well, because a lot of these photo images came from them. And of course, I'd like to thank Lucy Carrasco for helping facilitate this presentation. And then my immediate supervisor is Warren Spinner, who previously presented a webinar about tree selection from the Burlington Parks and Recreation Department, for giving me the opportunity to do this, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending. So we're going to plant trees, and we're going to get going with an outline of the things that we're going to cover. Proper planting and tree health are very closely related in the parts and the needs and functions of trees, things we can provide the trees to make it easy for them to become established. In Tree Planting 101, selecting a site is one of the most important things. And Elise had actually showed me a sticker. It's called Plan a Tree. And there is some planning involved if you want the tree to have a long life instead of just sticking them in the ground. So the site assessment, type of stock, that's the different kinds of nursery stock available. And then the roots of the trees are probably the most important thing at the time of planting, the condition and of the roots. The planting depth is often a problem that doesn't show up immediately. So it doesn't seem like a big deal at the time of planting, but it ends up being a very big deal down the road. Once the trees are planted properly, we'll talk about the things we can do to take care of them so they can become established properly. And then best management practices and some highlights of the stuff that we covered to make it nice and simple when we go out and plant trees or shrubs. So I talked about the relation for tree at the time of planting and the overall tree health. At the time the tree gets planted, you want everything to be as welcoming for the tree as you can. If trees are planted in a poor spot or in poor soil or too deep or too shallow, the trees are tough and they'll live for quite a while, and then they'll start having the problems. I guess the stem girdling roots we're going to get to later, or advantageous roots, or compaction. They're poorly drained, or they're too well drained. So it's a number of things below ground that'll cause problems for these trees. So now we got the parts and needs and functions of trees, and this seems pretty simple, but without them being the three simple things, the tree wouldn't happen. So you got the roots, the trunk, and the leaves. It seems simple, but it's a complex system that all works together. Without one of them, the other ones wouldn't function properly. Or if a portion of the tree is stressed for whatever reason, above or below ground, it's going to cause problems with the rest of the pieces. The tree does not need a whole lot. We can give it everything it needs. The tree, of course, needs water and minerals from the soil. The soil's important. There could be moisture in the soil, but it's not always available to the plant. It can be bound in the soil or by other plants. So the water seems easy enough, and it's the easiest thing that we can give the plants when they go in. Minerals are from the soil, and they have the big superstar minerals, and then an awful lot of trace elements that'll help. Oxygen. The tree needs air. It needs carbon dioxide for one of its primary functions, but it also has lots of gas exchange, and it uses other gaseous chemicals besides carbon dioxide. And it needs energy from the sun, photons, solar radiation, in order for these chemical reactions to take place. So then the functions of the tree, and not just trees, but all plants, photosynthesis is very important. And everyone, I think, knows the simple, the sunlight gives some energy. The chlorophyll can bind the chemicals, the carbon, and make a simple sugar. And the simple sugars join in chains and become pieces of cell wall, cellulose, microfibrils. And so photosynthesis makes it happen, and it's the meaning of life right there. Evapotranspiration is a function of a tree. When a tree's covered with leaves, the leaves are very sensitive to the air pressure and temperature, and what they do is they encourage the tree to bring that water up from the soil and move their material around, and it's all about the atmospheric pressure and temperature in order for the trees to act like a straw. If there's not enough energy above ground, the tree won't move its material around. It'll just stay put, kind of maintenance respiration. So you got your evapotranspiration, and it's the evapotranspiration of trees and other vegetation is a very important part of hydrologic cycle. The trunks of the trees are they're probably the thing that people look at most when they drive down the road or they walk around. What they see is the trunks of the trees, and the trees are very important. They hold the tree up. It's wood cells, xylem cells. The bark is protecting the tree, so it holds up all the branches and leaves, and it transports the material, water up the tree with the minerals, and the food, the phloem cells distribute the simple sugars throughout the tree. Here's a real good look at the roots of a tree, fairly mature tree. So the roots go down and out. they'll go down if they can. I'm going to use a pointer. The tree's root depth is limited by available resources, moisture, water, nutrients, and air. So you find most of the roots are in the top 2 feet of soil, and the feeder roots are going to be just under the turf. The feeder roots are the fine roots that do a lot of the absorption. The larger woody roots are anchor roots, and they're holding the tree up. They're much stronger. The smaller roots are constantly recycling themselves. The fine roots are real thin and mat-like, lots of absorption. On those fine roots are root hairs that only last for a few days. The soil affects the roots affect the soil. The dead small roots always slough off, and what they're doing is conditioning the soil as well. Here's another image of how wide and shallow the roots of trees are. If it's available for them, they'll keep going and going much further than the drip line of the tree, which is the outside edge of the crown. The tree roots can go 2 to 3 times the spread of the crown if there's available soil, moisture, and nutrients. This is why the site selection is so important. The leaves is where all the magic happens. These colors are there all the time, except they're just dominated by the green chlorophyll during the growing season. And then as the photo period and day length and temperatures change, the green chlorophyll is getting absorbed. The nutrients that come out of the leaves, some of them, into the twigs, and then what's left behind is the different colors of chlorophyll. That's red chlorophyll and yellow chlorophyll. The leaves is where that photosynthesis happens. We'll talk a little bit more about the leaf area of a tree and the different kinds of leaves. And some of you may have seen trees with different size and different shaped leaves throughout the crown, and that's normal. The trees on the inside of the crown are usually smaller and thinner, and they're suited to photosynthesize under cloudy conditions and shady conditions. They're inside the tree. The trees on the outside edge of the crown are usually larger and maybe darker green, and those are suited for producing photosynthesis in full sun. So it's always nice to see different size. Not all the leaves are the same on the same species of tree. Here's another angle of what the trees need. The water, when we finally get to planting trees, that water can often be the limiting factor of making the minerals available to the tree. The tree needs the minerals and oxygen and sun to happen. If you take one of these out, the tree is going to struggle for a while, and it probably won't become established. Here it is, the meaning of life, photosynthesis. Energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, changing the carbon, the water, to a simple sugar. And it's as easy as that. Oxygen is released after photosynthesis. Water vapor is released after photosynthesis as well. Some carbon is kicked out as well. The trees release a lot more. They release a lot more chemicals than just oxygen. And there's even been some area of concern about pollutants released by trees in California. They release terpenes. So they studied it and found it was an insignificant amount of pollution caused by trees. Yet they were releasing those gases. Photosynthesis also has a dark cycle. In order for it to complete its thing, it can't have the sun on it the whole time. It needs a little time in the dark to complete some of the reactions. Water and minerals come up from the soil all the way to the leaves. That atmospheric pressure draws it up. There's a number of pressure potentials within the tree, and it's easy to think of it as plumbing or a straw. The water molecules will hold to each other as well. The water molecules will hold themselves to the inside of the cell walls. So there's a lot of different pressure potentials working to get that water up. Often what limits the height of trees is this water column, and the failure of a water column is called cavitation. And a good way to think about it is if it gets so tall that the column of water can't stay together, or if you had a straw that you were drinking out of that had a damage on the side of it, and it's going to affect the ability for the water to make it to the top. The sugars move down. They don't go all the way to the roots, they go to different portions of the tree. Through their twigs, a lot of it gets stored. Some of it differentiates into defense chemicals. So the energy is stored in the tissue, the small tissue, in the twigs, in the cambium, and in the roots, and then in other cells. We're going to get to some good slides that we can see the cells. Here's one of them. All right, I'm gonna go through this and not spend as much time. This is the cambium, right? It grows inward and produces xylem cells. This is the transport. These are the pipes. In hardwoods, they're called sieve tubes, and in softwoods, they're called tracheids. The cambium grows on the other side as well, with the phloem for the transport. The outside edge of the phloem differentiates and becomes a cortex, which eventually becomes the bark, and it's protecting this sensitive layer of cambium. Here's the cambium again. Xylem on one side, phloem on the other side, and the cortex and bark beyond that. The cambium layer, depending on the species, is like 10 to 20 cell layers thick. That's where the growing happens, and that's called meristematic tissue. Here's some planting going on. It's about not damaging the roots during the planting, making a desirable hole, making sure the tree is straight. This planting is taking place at a nursery. A quality growing material here is compost coming out of that wheelbarrow, mixed with the soil from the site. Before you plant trees, you want to definitely consider the area where the tree is going to make it to, the growing space above ground, any adjacent trees or vegetation, utility lines that are overhead, proximity to buildings, how big will the tree, how large is it going to be when it's matured, and is it going to grow right up and block the view of your front window or your view over the hills. They're all things that need to be considered when planting a tree. And then below ground, everyone's going to want to consider the soil volume, where those roots are going to eventually make it to. The soil type, is it well drained? Is it poorly drained? I like to look for a dark. If the soil's dark, if it's dark brown or black, it doesn't. I don't really. It doesn't bother me how if there's coarse fragments or sandy. If it's dark, it's an indication that it's got some nutrients in it. Is there a wet soil? Is it dry soil? Are there underground utilities? We're going to talk more about that, how you can find those. And then the location, is it close to a building, sidewalks, driveway? You're going to push snow? All things that you need to do in this. It's about planning the tree before it goes in the ground. And this is the good stuff, more good stuff. When you go to the nursery, you see more opportunities to buy bare root stock, trees or shrubs in containers, or plants that are balled in burlap in a small wire basket. Here's some bare root trees. There's no soil. No soil. You get to see everything. They're getting treated with some moisture here. And then they're going in a bag for transport. Bare root trees are easy to handle. They're usually smaller. They're easy to plant. You get a good chance to inspect the root system. Container stocks, nursery grown, varying sizes of containers. They're great for transport, and they're great for the nursery to keep the roots from going crazy. Often inside these containers is a nice, soft, fluffy, nutrient-rich growing material, so the roots do go crazy. They go crazy, and then they can cause problems in the future. These are balled and burlap trees. These are dug with a mechanical spade, placed inside a basket that's lined with burlap, tied up for transport. And here's an image. There can be problems with these because the roots are often below the top of that soil. And it's less than desirable, but it's the way it is. So when these trees are collected, you definitely want to find the roots. It's great because they're big trees. They can be transported, except a lot of the roots are lost. There's a mechanical spade used to dig the trees. It's real handy. He has a chainsaw as well, because you maybe need to remove some of the lower limbs in order to get the knives into the tree. But there's something missing. 95% of the fine roots are gone now. So these trees, even though people are getting them at the nursery or having them delivered, they're transplants. You're not planting it for the first time. It's a transplant, and it's got a low root volume, and that's make or break. The most important thing for these trees when they go in the ground is that the roots grow, and not the top. These are girdling roots. This is a problem. It constricts the flow of material. Constricts the flow that we talked about in the phloem for the food. It grows against itself, and it hurts that cambium layer underneath. So these are all girdling roots, and this one looks like it was maybe in a container because it's so circular. One way to find the roots, if you get a new tree, is to wash that soil off of them and just blow it right off with a hose. You might damage some of the roots, but that's fine. If this piece here, kind of the outer edge of that root got blown away by the high pressure, that's okay. There's plenty of roots. It's important to wash those roots to find the flare, to find the root flare. This is a shrub that had been root washed. Everything's exposed. You can find out the flare. You can take these cutters and remove any circling roots or kinked roots. Some roots go out and then right back in. This is what we're talking about, root pruning. You want to find the first order roots. This is a taproot. Everyone's heard about those, and the taproots are fine for establishment. When the seeds germinate, it's their nature. One side goes up, the other side goes down. Transplants are tough with the taproot. You can pluck them right out of there if you dig deep around them, or you can cut that. You can cut that right out of there because it's used for establishment, and by then there's other lateral roots. Here's an illustration of proper planting. The hole is great. You want quality material adjacent to the tree. This image right here says top of root ball, slightly above ground level. The top of the root ball, this is incorrect. You want to find the roots. You need to find the root flare. And by shaving and combing the top of this root ball off or washing it, you can find it. The hole should be big enough so you can get the material off the tree, the basket and the burlap. And it's okay if some of that soil breaks away. It's not the end of the world. It's just fine. So this tree on the left, has a nice exposed flare. It was established right at the surface level. This tree on the right does not have a flare. This tree's roots are underneath this soil quite a ways. So this tree on the right was planted too deep. This tree on the left was planted perfectly, or it was naturally established. The trees want to have that flare. These trees have nice flares. If you're ever in the forest, you never see a tree that's planted too deep. They all became established right on the surface, and that's why you see all those exposed roots. You're going to love this one. There's a tree, a balding burlap tree. The crew had previously planted another tree, just like this one, and they found the root flare. Here's a comb, your regular garden comb. You can use these to peel that soil away. We use a small probe. It's called a chaining pin, and we send it down through this soil to get an estimate of where that root flare is. This guy's finding the flare right here. This is one of my coworkers, Gene. So he's removing all this soil and any small roots that are in it. The flare is sometimes called the first order roots, or root plate, and those are the ones that want to be right on the surface. So all this stuff is extra, and it's because of it's because of a number of things. Like they're cultivated in the nursery, and the rows get mowed or tilled, or when they're planted when they're little at the nursery, they don't want to stake every tree, and so they'll just put some more soil up on them, and then when they're dug by that mechanical spade, the soil gets pressed up again on the main stem. They found these roots about 10 inches below the top of that root ball. It's why if you're getting a balding burlap tree, you definitely want to find the first order roots, the root flare. That's the big one that you see on the trees in the forest. These are advantageous roots that are growing up into that soil now, and these roots can turn into stem girdling roots in the future. The tree will be all right. If it's planted that deep, it'll stay alive for 5, 8, 10, or 12 years. Then it's going to start showing some signs of decline. You can gently remove the material, or you can be vigorous about it. You're not going to hurt the tree any more than all that soil on top of the roots is hurting it. He found these. These are the fine roots. The fine roots that absorb. These are anchor roots. I think the flare is still down here. We're going to find out. This is the main flare. The shovel is a shovel or a straight edge across the planting hole. Often helps with the height. I think he's going to remove these advantageous roots. These ones formed because they were covered with soil. He's pointing at the flare. That was the top of the soil. Here's the flare. Cuts them right off with the hand pruners. It's fine. It's a root prune. You have to do it. It's not going to hurt the tree. There's some more of the roots that were removed. That's where the soil was. There's the tree when it's done. Planted at a proper height. A small layer of mulch around to keep the moisture in that soil instead of evaporating, and to keep the weeds and grass from competing. 2 metal stakes. I think we've got some more staking slides coming up. A brand new tree is worth staking. Some people say they don't need to stake them, and they'll see how it does, but you don't want to traumatize the tree any more than it already has been. We work here in town, so we plant these in, we call them tree grates or tree pits or sidewalk plantings. We're not really measuring the height here. We're centering this in the opening. There's going to be space between the bottom of the grate and the top of the soil. We're just using this as a centering device. So the poor planting, it's what not to do. You don't want to plant it too deep. The roots will grow up, eventually become stem girdling roots, and the tree's going to struggle that whole time. You plant them too shallow, the roots are going to want to dry out. Even if you water them the whole time, it's got to be just right. Want to make that hole oversized, right, and give the soil adjacent to the new tree. It's a little softer. Maybe add some material, some organic material. You want to remove all that material off the tree, the burlap, the rope, the cage, or the basket. So if you don't plan well for your trees, you won't be planting well. This is a gator bag. What it does is release water slowly. It's a 20-gallon container, and it releases the water in like 6 hours. A slow flow. They need that water. They need that water to make everything happen. And so one of the most important things once a tree is planted properly is to keep it watered. And here it is again. We water the tree once or twice a week with one of those bags. If you're going to water the tree with a pail, you just need to pour it very slowly. Often there'll be a small berm, and that's to help contain the water on the roots, so that they can put some energy into growing additional roots. Low flow, pour it really slowly if you're going to pour water on it. Because the tree has a reduced small root mass, it's hard for them to absorb all the water they need. You get some signs of root loss and moisture stress, the leaves drying out, changing colors. There's some leaf curl. The trees, it's common. The trees in the nursery have nice tops. They all look pretty good. Everyone looks at the tops of the trees when they go in the nursery. The primary thing that people should be looking at is the roots. What condition are the roots in? What material are the roots in? What containers the roots in? How deep are the roots in that container? So they get a nice full crown because of the way they've been pruned in the nursery, and it requires a lot of water to keep that crown. So they get stressed. No water, they can't grow. They can't produce the food. And when they're stressed by drought, they're susceptible to other damages. All these trees are getting transplanted. Even though it's new from the nursery and you didn't dig it out of the ground, someone else dug it out of the ground. It's a transplant, and they're being transported. it brings on their own kind of stresses. They could be experiencing drought stress. They're susceptible to insects, diseases. So it's really important to keep them watered and get those roots growing. Warren talked about plant selection, you want to pick a tree that's good, in the best shape it can be coming out of the nursery. The trees that fail is transplanted trees that have failed is because of the roots were never able to establish themselves. The crown root ratio, a lack of watering, poor care after planting, they'll become stressed and fail because the roots were never established properly. So you transplant a large tree, it's got a larger crown, it needs larger roots to become established. The mulching helps with the moisture, but too much mulch can cause some problems. You don't want to pile the mulch right up on the newly planted tree or any tree. It makes the bark soft. It makes the bark soft where insects can gain entrance. The moles like to come in here and eat this cambium on the soft, the thin bark. The roots will want to grow up into this mulch, and then when the tree isn't watered or we don't get the rain, those roots start to dry out as well. So it's a good idea to mulch them properly. Use chips, wood chips, or bark mulch is pretty good. I really go for those synthetic wraps over the tree to keep the weeds down. 6 feet, I mean, the bigger the better. If you're going to mulch around the tree, it's nice to go out as far as you can. A nice even layer, thin, and keep it away from the main stem. And inspect it. You can send your hand in there to see how moist the soil is underneath the mulch. Here's a beautiful planting hole, and here's the cheat sheet of things to remember. Inspecting the site above and below ground. You want a nice spot for your nice tree. You want to spend the money and time on a tree and then plant it in a less than desirable spot. You want to look at the roots at the nursery if you can. You're going to want to find a root flare. I don't buy trees at the nursery unless I find the flare. The hole should be nice and wide, not too deep, and the backfill around the soil is going to want to be desirable for those roots to grow. Planted at a proper height, the flare right at the soil surface. Organic matter, compost, if the soil is maybe lighter in color or coarser in texture, you get some organic material in there. It's going to make space for air. It's going to add some nutrients, change the structure of the soil slightly. Remove all the material, the rope, the burlap. Looks like they had some stones in the soil as well. And then don't just forget about it. You need to keep watering that tree and inspect it carefully to do everything you can so it can become established. Dig safe. is a quality organization so that nobody damages any underground utilities or injures themselves by digging, especially on an electric line. Dig Safe will let you know where your television, communication lines, the fiber optics, this will be orange. They'll mark the water lines. Those will be blue. Often they come from the street to the house. Sometimes you can find the house. You can see on the front of the house where the water enters, and if you look out in the road, you might find a water cap. They'll mark on any underground electric utilities, and they'll also mark the gas lines. So you don't want to plant right on top of all that stuff. And then here's some planting going on. Here's some planting going on at the nursery. At Branch Out Burlington's nursery, there's a citizen tree group here in town, in Burlington. So they plant the small bare root trees in these grow bags, and the grow bags are a thick felt material. They grow these trees for 2 to 4 years, and then these trees are dug out of the ground, transported, and planted on the streets in Burlington. It's a great resource for the Parks Department, and it's also a great resource if anyone ever wants to come out and plant trees. There's another shot of the grow bags, root flares, top of the soil, nice material to grow in, nice and straight. More planting, a mixture of compost and the soil that came out of these holes go inside the grow bag to make this environment as suitable as possible. Irrigation is sent down these lines as well. So these trees have the best environment they can get around here to become established. And that is Branch Out Burlington. If anyone ever wants to plant trees or learn more about trees or take part in a tree walk is what's going on here. This is a street tree planting with some of the neighbors, and this is a tree sale. If you want to buy some bare root trees, you can get them from Branch Out Burlington at a reasonable price. They got something for everybody. And that's my email address if anyone ever wanted to contact me about all things tree related. I'm gonna send it back to Lucy or Elise. Thank you so much for everybody. I hope I didn't bore you.
Great, thank you, Brian. We'll give a couple minutes here to see if anybody has any questions. And we'll stick around till 1. If not, the link that Lucy just added to the chat box is the link for our SurveyMonkey quick 2-minute quick survey about the webinar, and if you've been able to come to any of the other ones we've held this spring, kind of giving us an idea of what's been working and what's not. Next week we'll record this, we'll convert this recording to a YouTube video and have it up on our website, and the link Lucy just put in the chat box also. So if you have anybody that you know of that wasn't able to make it, or you'd like to link to this recording, feel free to do that. It will be on YouTube.